All right, welcome back in, everybody. Zach Gelb Show on a Monday, Fox Sports 920. The Jersey 609-919-9200 is the phone number. If you want to hang with us, we come to you from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios, and time right now in our studios is 4:15. You know the deal yesterday. Giants win against the Ravens. Eagles lose to the Washington Redskins, and the Jets play later tonight on Monday Night Football. Someone that called the Eagles' loss yesterday to the Redskins in our nation's capital is Kenny Albert, who does a tremendous job as a play-by-play man for the NFL on Fox, and he joins us right now. Kenny, appreciate the time, and how are you today, my friend?
I'm good, Zach. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, and we appreciate you coming on what is a very busy day for you. Let's just get into the Eagles right out of the gate. Bad run defense yesterday and bad offensive line play. But let's start with that run defense. What made them so bad yesterday against the Redskins rushing offense?
I think a big part of it was how much time they spent on the field. You know, going into the game, Zach, a big story had been that the Eagles led the league in time of possession over their first 4 games. Quite the opposite from the 3 years under Chip Kelly when they had the worst time of possession in the league. You know, the Eagles' defense yesterday was on the field for 38 straight plays, if you take away the kneel down at the end of the first half. So you also have to give credit to the Redskins. Their backs were terrific, whether it was Matt Jones or Chris Thompson. Robert Kelly had the 45-yard run. So you have to look at the other side as well. But I think defensively there was probably a bit of fatigue that came into play, given that they were on the field at one point for 19 straight minutes of action.
It's definitely surprising to see the Eagles defense play that bad, and yesterday they allowed almost 7 yards per carry on the ground. The first 3 games, the Eagles defense, and we knew it was going to be the strength going in, but they excelled, and they even held Pittsburgh to not getting a touchdown in that Week 3 game. But ever since that bye, you've seen a bad defensive performance against the Lions and another bad defensive performance yesterday. Should Eagles fans be concerned with their defense right now?
Well, I think, Zach, you also have to give credit to the Redskins' offensive line. They had one of the top offensive lines in the league, and they were terrific yesterday. So should Eagle fans be somewhat concerned? Sure. I mean, things are going really well the first 2 games and not so much the last 2. I think penalties also came into play. When you look at the 27 combined penalties the Eagles committed over the last 2 weeks, Fletcher Cox had a big one on third down, which led to the third Redskins touchdown, which put them ahead for good. It looked like they would have to set up for a field goal, but we're given a bit of a reprieve due to that penalty, and Matt Jones scored the go-ahead touchdown.
The penalties are a great point because everyone was giving words of praise to Jim Schwartz going into the year, and I was one of them, but I said the one down flaw in his career is his defense. They aren't disciplined. How do they cut those out? Because that's definitely alarming. You're right on that.
Well, I think Schwartz is a terrific defensive coordinator. We've watched him through the years in Tennessee and then as the head coach in Detroit. And going into the game yesterday, the Eagles had the second-ranked defense in the league through the first 5 weeks. But they're going to take some chances, you know, with the style they play up front. If you look at the numbers from Detroit, a lot of offsides penalties. It's been somewhat similar in Philadelphia. And my partner, John Lynch, made an excellent point, really interesting point yesterday. He talked about the fact that Schwartz's defense are prone to the offsides, yet in Tampa Bay, he played on a similar defense, and I think he said the year they won the Super Bowl, they were only called for 3 defensive offsides penalties all season, so I think that's something to keep an eye on.
Let's get to the Eagles' offensive line because you knew that was going to be a storyline going into the game. It was not an impressive debut for Big V, but really it wasn't only him. The rest of the offensive line, they just looked bad yesterday, Kenny.
Well, it wasn't a good start. You had the sack on the first play with Kerrigan and Blackman, and then Kerrigan had another sack, finished with 2.5 in the first half, 5 overall for the Redskins. So now a tough situation with Big V coming in for Lane Johnson, and not a performance that they'll want to remember. And hopefully things move forward. And now with 1 game under his belt, Big V can move ahead. And but again, like you said, with the 5 sacks, not a great performance by the Eagles' offensive line.
And Doug Peterson said he thought that Big V played a better game than what most people would have thought once he did get settled in. I did not see that. They're going to stick with Big V for this week's game coming up. Do you believe that's the right decision? You've talked to Doug Peterson. Why is he so confident in the rookie?
Yeah, I mean, I would trust him on that one. I'm not a coach. I haven't looked at the game film. Again, there's a lot that goes into it. You look at the guys across the way, and the Eagles did certainly seem to throw some extra protection out there for him. There were a number of plays, in particular early on, where they used 3 tight ends, Ertz, Selleck, and Burton, all in the game at one time to help with the protection. So, again, I'll defer to the coaches on that one.
And it's amazing, even with the bad offensive line play, the bad run defense, and all the penalties, the Eagles still had a chance to win the game, and a big reason for that was, yes, the defense and special teams. Even though the defense didn't play a good game yesterday, they were able to get that 14-point swing. But I look at the quarterback play with not a lot of protection. One thing that really stood out to me, and it has stood out to me seeing Carson Wentz play this year, is his footwork. He did a good job yesterday, especially on his feet.
He did. I mean, I was impressed. He didn't get a lot of opportunities to throw the ball in the first half, made some real nice throws in the second half, in particular in the fourth quarter. But I think the turning point, as far as the Eagles were concerned, was the Vernon Davis penalty. And we talked about it on the broadcast. He gets called for the unnecessary celebration, and that really is what led to the kick return touchdown. Because if Hopkins kicks off from the 35, he probably booms it right through the end zone. He was third in the league in touchbacks going into the game yesterday. They kick off from the 20. Smallwood returned at 86 yards thanks to the Vernon Davis penalty, and then the Falcon Jacobs return right after that. So it was a really bizarre game. It goes from 14-0 to 14-all in a matter of minutes. And like I said earlier, the Redskins, aside from the Eagles kneel down at the end of the half, ran 38 straight plays. They had the ball for over 19 minutes consecutively during that span.
Do you have a problem with the league and the officials really trying to stop all these celebrations? Because you're right, that Vernon Davis penalty, it was a turning point, but I don't believe it should have been called. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was one of those that maybe shouldn't have been called, but the referees are graded, the officials are graded every game, and it is the rule. They have to. You can't blame the officials really. They have to follow the rule book, and they study it for months and months heading into the season, and then every week, and they receive tapes from Dean Blandino of calls from previous games. They get graded on every play, so if it's in the rule book, they have to call it.
Kenny Albert with us, play-by-play man for the NFL on Fox and about 9,000 other jobs on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920, The Jersey. Kenny, what was your take on the decision of Doug Peterson to punt the football and give it back to the Redskins in the final minutes of that game? But not only that, take a timeout before the punt. I didn't get the timeout.
Yeah, I thought it was the right call at the time. I forget exactly how much time was left on the clock, but we talked about it during the commercial break. And we thought that was the right move to punt and use the 2 timeouts. They had taken one already, and if they stopped Matt Jones on third down, they would have gotten the ball back. So it doesn't always work, but it's hard to second guess when we thought it was the right call at the time.
Talking about second guessing, a lot of Eagles fans today are second guessing how good this team is. You've seen them in person now. You've known what they were capable of earlier on in the season, sitting at 3-2, 2 tough losses. How good do you think this Eagles team can be?
Well, the division certainly seems to be better than people expected. When you look at what the Cowboys have done, the Redskins are on a roll now, winning 4 straight. The Giants got back on track with their win yesterday over the Ravens. And I think if you told most Eagle fans prior to the season 3-2 after 5 games, they would have taken it probably about where you thought they'd be, 2-3 or 3-2, somewhere in that range. Obviously, once they win the first 3, you're hoping for better. I know they have a tough one coming up this week against Minnesota, but probably about where I thought they'd be heading into the season.
You're right. You mentioned that division. It is a lot better than when people thought it was, and people didn't factor in the rookies and how good they would be. You see what Carson Wentz is doing in Philadelphia and Dallas. You have 2 rookies in Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. How do these rookies just look so cool, calm, and collective? Because with Elliott, it's not like he's just having a good season. He's having the best season in the NFL this year for a running back.
Yeah, it's amazing, Zach. I think back to a guy like Carson Palmer in Cincinnati who sat his first year behind John Kitna. Aaron Rodgers sat for a couple of years around behind Brett Favre in Green Bay. But now these rookies step right in, whether it's at the quarterback position, running back position, and it's really impressive. I know with Carson Wentz, so much talk about the pro-style system that North Dakota State ran in college, and that's why he's been able to do such a good job at the line, changing plays. Talking to some of his teammates and coaches, they say he's outstanding in the huddle at practice, and just seems so poised far beyond his years.
No way the Cowboys, though, could go back to Romo, right?
Boy, that's a tough one. I mean, Prescott has been outstanding. I haven't seen him in person, but just watching the highlights and on TV, I wouldn't say there's no way. I mean, in Tony Romo, you have a guy who's built up a decade worth of excellent work in the NFL. He's won divisions. He's gotten the Cowboys to the postseason. I know oftentimes in all sports we hear that the starter shouldn't lose his job due to injury. It's going to be a real tough call for the Cowboys. If you do go back to Romo and he falters, at least you know what you have in Prescott. So we'll see what happens. I guess that's why Jason Garrett and his coaching staff get paid the big bucks.
I remember when Drew Bledsoe got hurt and Bill Belichick had a decision. He stuck with Tom Brady, and it did work out well. Now, the Patriots did end up needing Bledsoe later in that season in that AFC Championship game when Brady did get hurt. But I just would believe, Kenny, that's a tough sell to the locker room. I'm not a Tony Romo basher. I think he's a very good quarterback. I know some people do bash him a lot. That's just the nature of playing quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. But you have a quarterback right now that's 5-1. How do you sell that to the players in the locker room if you make a change?
Right, that's a good point, bringing up what happened with Brady and Bledsoe. But, I mean, I think the way to sell it to him is here's a guy who's gotten us to the playoffs. He's been to numerous Pro Bowls. He has the greatest numbers in the history of the Dallas Cowboys at the quarterback position. Now, you could certainly point to Troy Aikman as a guy who won 3 Super Bowls. It was a different system back then. His numbers offensively aren't what Romo's are. I'm not saying Romo's the greatest quarterback in Cowboys history because Aikman won 3 Super Bowls and Staubach did as well. But I think that's the way to sell it. This guy has put together a decade, a body of work that's up in the top 5 in the entire league as far as quarterbacks. I'm not saying this is the way they'll go, but if they do, that's the way you would sell it to the team. And, again, if not, if you stick with Prescott, it's a guy who's had tremendous success this year coming out of college. Was not a first-round pick, obviously, but he's been tremendous over these first 6 weeks.
Kenny Albert with us. Odell Beckham sensational yesterday after having really 2 bad weeks. I was impressed, though, with the way that he did handle himself. I'm not going to kill him for having the penalty at the end of the game. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but you did see him fumble early in that game, and then he did respond. Do you believe Odell Beckham Jr. is back and in the good graces of the Giants organization?
Well, didn't see the game, obviously. It was the same time as the Eagles-Redskins, but did see some of the highlights. But he's obviously a tremendous player and one of the keys for the Giants, not only this season, but for the next decade moving forward. Hopefully he's learned from some of his errors over the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure the coach and management have talked to him, and it was a pretty impressive performance yesterday against the Ravens.
No question. And with the Giants, though, I still don't feel a lot of confidence amongst the Giants fan. Now they're at 500. They go to London this week to play the Rams. Do you believe this Giants team? Do they have another run in them this year, or is it going to be what we saw in the previous weeks with the Giants?
No, I think they're a solid team. The only time I had them in person this year was week 2 against the Saints, and they eked out the victory on a last-minute field goal on that one. But I think they'll be fine. I'm a fan of the new head coach, Ben McAdoo, and you know what you're getting in Eli Manning, a guy who just has ice in his veins and has won 2 Super Bowls. So they've obviously made improvements on the defensive side as well. So I think they'll be fine. They have the Rams, like you said, this week in London, and the schedule I know gets a bit tougher in November, but I think they'll be okay. But again, it's a tough division. These teams are going to start beating each other. I know yesterday was the Eagles' first division game. They have 2 of the next 3 against the division. So I think that's what it comes down to is the NFC East matchups when they get into that stretch where they all start beating each other up.
Kenny Albert with us. Let's get back to the game that you did yesterday. Something that was very surprising was Fletcher Cox, who's been a beast for the Eagles, did not even register a tackle yesterday. That Redskins offensive line, I know we talked about it, but to hold Fletcher Cox to not one single tackle, that's impressive.
No, it certainly was, and we referenced the penalty earlier. He was called for 2 key penalties, but it is unusual to see Cox without a tackle in the stat line. But again, you have to credit the Redskins and their offensive line. They did a tremendous job.
And it's crazy how this Eagles season is starting to change, and you knew the importance of Lane Johnson. You probably knew this thing wasn't going to get overturned, and now the Eagles are in a tough spot. When you talked to Doug Peterson in your meeting with him before the game, was there at all any disappointment in the voice of Doug Peterson if you brought up Lane Johnson?
You know what? I really don't think that Lane Johnson came up during the course of the conversation that we had with Doug on Saturday. We talked about Big V and what his expectations were for him, but it was more looking forward, not looking back.
Okay, Kenny, I got two more before we let you run. Pass interference. I know you weren't able to watch every game yesterday because you were working a game of their own, but I thought the pass interference call on Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie was just an absolute joke. I don't understand how they call that. And then also, I feel bad today for the Atlanta Falcons because Julio Jones got mugged. How about pass interference? Because it's still, to me, the most inconsistent rule in the National Football League.
Yeah, hard for me to comment, Jack. I didn't see either of them. Read about them, flew home last night, and was over at Rangers practice this morning, so I didn't get a chance to see. I will watch them both tonight, but didn't see either one. Pass interference is obviously a subjective call sometimes, and it's really the penalty in football that usually affects the game the greatest, because it could be a 30-yard penalty. It could be a 60-yard penalty. We saw one a couple of weeks ago against the Lions. It was a 66-yard penalty, different than the college rules. So that's the one penalty that really could hurt teams. And on a couple of occasions, as you mentioned, with Rodgers-Cromartie and the Julio Jones, Richard Sherman play certainly had an effect at the end of camp yesterday, but I haven't seen him yet, so it's hard to comment.
Fair enough. Finally, before we let you run, the Jets have been a team. They've had bad coaching. They've allowed big plays, and they've also been inclined to turning over the football to the other team. They have to win tonight if they want to salvage their season. Only at one win on the year. They're in Arizona, a team that's trying to get back to 500. Give me a thought about this Arizona Jets game tonight.
Well, I haven't seen 1 second of the Jets this year. I'm in a different game every Sunday, so haven't seen the Jets. Obviously, read about them, keep up with them. I think everyone knew that it was a real tough 6-game stretch heading into the season. Those first 6 games on their schedule, very tough. You see Arizona a couple of weeks ago against Buffalo, and that was a shocker. The Bills were 0-2 at the time. They had just fired Greg Roman. Arizona was one of the hottest teams in the league coming in, and the Bills really took it to them. So, again, Jets need the victory. Arizona playing at home. We'll see. But you're right. The Jets, if they don't win tonight, that's pretty much it. I don't see them bouncing back as far as a playoff run from 1-5.
You do so many sports doing play-by-play, and every play-by-play announcer has a spot chart. Was Big V the toughest name for you to ever pronounce in your career, or was there another one?
It was definitely a challenge, but once I wrote it out phonetically, it was fine. And John Lynch, my partner, also practiced it a couple of times, so it's definitely up there. We did a Utah-Alabama Sugar Bowl about 6 or 7 years ago, and Utah had about 10 or 15 names similar to Big V, so that was probably the biggest challenge because you had so many of them. But you do practice it. I saw the guys on the NFL Network had fun with it yesterday, trying to write it out on the chalkboard. I get some of the European hockey names once in a while, so I've had some challenges throughout my career.
Well, Kenny Albert, you're an ultimate pro. We do appreciate the time today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jack. Anytime.
Thanks so much. There's Kenny Albert joining us, NFL on Fox, and also the play-by-play voice of the New York Rangers on ESPN, and also does some baseball. Did that exciting Game 5 in our nation's capital. That's Halepuli Vati Vaitai. That's how you pronounce it. Oh, boy, that's tough. And you can see Kenny kept on calling him Big V because as a broadcaster, once you say it for the first time on the broadcast, you could call him a nickname after that. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. What we'll do right now is we'll take a quick break, and when we get back, the head football coach of the Temple Owls, Matt Rule, will join us. An exuberant victory over the weekend. Down in the football game late. 32 seconds to go. 70 yards, and the Temple Owls came back. We'll talk to Matt Rule next on the Zach Gelb Show as we roll along on a Monday.